Arya Blake stood at the front of the classroom, her heart racing as she prepared for the upcoming debate competition. The room buzzed with excitement, filled with students eager to showcase their skills. Arya had always thrived in this environment. She was the captain of the debate team and known for her quick wit and sharp arguments. Today, however, there was an added layer of tension in the air. Sophie Lang was her opponent. Sophie was a quiet force, often overlooked by her peers. With her long, dark hair framing her face and paint-stained fingers, she embodied creativity. While Arya was the embodiment of confidence, Sophie was more reserved, a talented artist who preferred to express herself through her work rather than words. Yet, beneath that calm exterior lay a fierce determination that Arya had come to recognize. As the debate began, Arya couldn't help but steal glances at Sophie. She watched as Sophie spoke passionately about her topic, her voice steady and compelling. Arya felt an unfamiliar flutter in her stomach, a mix of admiration and annoyance. How could someone so different from her challenge her so effectively? The rivalry that had simmered between them for years intensified in that moment. After the debate concluded, Arya emerged victorious, but the win felt hollow. As she walked out of the auditorium, she overheard whispers among their classmates. "Did you see how close that was?" one girl said. Sophie almost had her. The thought gnawed at Arya. She had worked hard for this position and wasn't about to let anyone, especially Sophie, overshadow her efforts. Later that day, as she made her way to art class, her least favorite subject, she spotted Sophie in the hallway. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and Arya felt a surge of irritation mixed with something else she couldn't quite place. "What are you doing here?" Arya asked sharply. Sophie raised an eyebrow, unfazed by Arya's tone. "I have art class just like everyone else," she replied coolly. "Not all of us can be debate queens." Arya rolled her eyes but couldn't deny the spark in Sophie's words. "Whatever," she muttered, turning on her heel and striding away. But deep down, she felt a strange sense of challenge igniting within her. The next day brought an unexpected twist. During lunch, an announcement echoed through the cafeteria. There would be a school event where students could showcase their talents in various areas, debate included. The twist: each participant would be paired with someone from a different discipline. Arya's heart sank when she heard that she would be paired with none other than Sophie Lang. As they met to discuss their presentation, the air crackled with tension. "This is ridiculous," Arya said, crossing her arms defiantly. "Why should I work with you?" "Because we have to," Sophie replied calmly, unfazed by Arya's hostility. "And maybe if you opened your mind a little, you'd see that I can bring something valuable to this." Arya scoffed but felt a flicker of intrigue at Sophie's confidence. They spent hours preparing for their presentation, arguing over points and refining their ideas until they reached an uneasy truce. The more they worked together, the more Arya found herself drawn to Sophie's passion and creativity. On the day of the event, nerves coursed through both girls as they took the stage together. Their presentation was met with applause and cheers from their classmates, a surprising success that neither had anticipated. But just as they were basking in their victory, disaster struck. A heavy door swung shut behind them as they exited the stage, locking them inside a small storage room adjacent to the auditorium. Panic set in as they realized they were trapped. "Great. Just great," Arya exclaimed angrily as she pounded on the door. "What are we supposed to do now?" Sophie sighed, leaning against a stack of boxes. "We wait for someone to find us," she said pragmatically. "Wait. That's your plan?" Arya shot back. "What do you suggest?" "We can't exactly break down the door," Sophie replied with an edge of frustration. The tension between them was palpable as they settled into silence, each lost in their thoughts about how they ended up here, together. As minutes turned into what felt like hours, something shifted in the atmosphere around them. The initial anger faded into an awkward stillness filled with unspoken words and lingering glances. "Look," Sophie finally said, breaking the silence. "I know we've been rivals for a long time, but maybe this is a chance for us to actually talk." Arya hesitated but then nodded slowly. "Fine," she said reluctantly. "Let's talk." In that cramped space filled with boxes and forgotten supplies, two rivals began to unravel layers of themselves they never expected to share. As the minutes stretched on in the dimly lit storage room, I felt a strange mix of frustration and curiosity. The initial panic of being locked in with my rival, Sophie Lang, had faded into an uneasy silence. I leaned against a stack of boxes, crossing my arms defensively, while Sophie sat on the floor, her back against the wall, looking surprisingly calm. "Do you think anyone even knows we're in here?" I asked, breaking the silence. My voice echoed slightly in the cramped space. "Probably," Sophie replied with a shrug. "But it might take a while for them to figure it out. They're probably too busy celebrating our presentation." I rolled my eyes at her nonchalant attitude. "You're not worried at all, are you?" "Not really," she said, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. "I mean, what's the worst that could happen? We miss lunch." I couldn't help but chuckle at her laid-back perspective. It was infuriating how she could remain so composed while I was practically pacing with anxiety. "You really don't care about anything, do you?" Sophie tilted her head, studying me for a moment. "I care about a lot of things. Just not the same things you do." "What's that supposed to mean?" I shot back, feeling defensive. "It means you're so focused on being the best at everything that you forget to enjoy it," she said softly. "You might find it easier if you let your guard down once in a while." Her words struck a chord deep within me. I had always prided myself on my ambition and drive, but was it worth sacrificing everything else? I opened my mouth to respond but found myself at a loss for words. Instead, I changed the subject. "So what do you do when you're not busy being an artist?" I asked, genuinely curious. Sophie's eyes lit up as she spoke about her passion for painting and how it allowed her to express herself in ways words never could. She described the vibrant colors she loved to use and how each piece told a story, her story. As she spoke, I could see the passion radiating from her, and for the first time, I realized that there was so much more to Sophie than just being my rival. "I've seen some of your work," I admitted hesitantly. "It's good." "Good." She raised an eyebrow playfully. "Just good. Okay, fine. It's amazing," I conceded with a laugh. "I just didn't expect it from you." Sophie smiled softly, and for a moment, the rivalry between us felt like a distant memory. We continued talking about our interests and dreams, me sharing my aspirations for debate and leadership roles while Sophie opened up about her desire to attend art school and create meaningful pieces that could inspire others. Time passed quickly as we exchanged stories and laughter, each revelation drawing us closer together. The tension that had once filled the room began to dissipate, replaced by an unexpected camaraderie. Then suddenly, there was a loud thud outside the door that jolted us both from our conversation. My heart raced as I jumped to my feet. "What was that?" "I don't know," Sophie replied, standing up beside me. We pressed our ears against the door, straining to hear any sounds from outside. A muffled voice called out, someone had finally noticed we were missing. Relief washed over me as I realized we might soon be free. But just as quickly as that relief came, it was followed by another wave of anxiety. What would happen when we stepped back into the world? Would we go back to being rivals? Would everything change between us after this experience? Before I could dwell on those thoughts too long, another thud echoed through the door followed by voices getting louder. "Aria, Sophie, are you in there?" It was one of our classmates. "Yes, we're here," I shouted back, my voice tinged with excitement. A few moments later, the door swung open with a creak, revealing several concerned faces staring back at us. The light flooded into the dark room, momentarily blinding me as I squinted against it. "Thank goodness. We thought we'd lost you two forever," one girl exclaimed as she rushed forward to help us out. As I stepped out into the hallway filled with students celebrating our successful event, reality hit me like a wave crashing onto shore. The laughter and chatter surrounded me like a familiar blanket, but something felt different now. I glanced back at Sophie standing just behind me, her expression unreadable. Our eyes met for a brief moment before she looked away shyly. "Guess we're rivals again," I said lightly, trying to mask the uncertainty creeping into my voice. Sophie smiled softly but didn't respond right away. Instead, she turned to walk away with our classmates who were eager to celebrate their victory. As I watched her go, an unexpected feeling settled in my chest, a mix of longing and confusion. Maybe this rivalry wasn't what it seemed after all. The days following our unexpected time locked in that storage room felt surreal. I returned to my routine of classes and debates, but everything seemed slightly altered. The familiar buzz of the school hallways was now tinged with a new awareness, especially when I caught sight of Sophie. Our brief moments together had shifted something inside me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her than I had ever realized. One afternoon, I found myself wandering into the art wing of the school, a place I typically avoided. The vibrant colors and creative chaos felt foreign to me, yet I was drawn in by an inexplicable urge to see Sophie's world. As I entered the main studio, the air was filled with the scent of paint and turpentine. Students were scattered around, each lost in their own creative process. I spotted Sophie at a canvas in the corner, her brow furrowed in concentration as she mixed colors on her palette. She wore an oversized sweater that swallowed her frame, and her hair fell loosely around her shoulders. For a moment, I simply watched her work, captivated by how alive she seemed in this space. "Hey," I said, stepping closer. She looked up, surprise flickering across her face before it settled into a warm smile. "Aria, what are you doing here?" I wanted to see what you were up to," I admitted, feeling a bit foolish for my sudden intrusion. Sophie's smile widened as she gestured toward an empty easel beside her. "Want to try painting?" "Me? Paint?" I laughed nervously. "I don't think that's a good idea." "Why not? It could be fun. Just grab a brush and let your imagination run wild," she encouraged. I hesitated but then decided to give it a shot. After all, how often did I step outside my comfort zone? I picked up a brush and stood beside her, glancing at her canvas filled with swirling colors and abstract shapes. "What are you working on?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "It's a piece about finding your voice," she explained, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "I want to capture the feeling of breaking free from expectations." As she spoke, I felt a strange connection forming between us, a bridge built on shared experiences and newfound understanding. "That sounds amazing," I said sincerely. With a deep breath, I dipped my brush into some paint and began making random strokes on my own canvas. At first, it felt awkward, my movements were stiff and unsure. But as Sophie guided me with gentle suggestions and encouragement, something shifted. The colors began to blend together, creating an abstract representation of chaos that somehow felt liberating. "This is actually kind of fun," I admitted after a while, smiling at the mess I had created. Sophie laughed softly. "See, you just have to let go of your inhibitions." As we painted together, we chatted about everything, our families, our dreams for the future, and even our fears. With each shared story, the barriers between us continued to crumble. It was refreshing to be vulnerable with someone who understood what it meant to struggle against expectations. "You know," Sophie said thoughtfully as she mixed more paint on her palette, "I used to think you were just this perfect girl who had it all figured out." I raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Me? Perfect? Hardly. But you are," she insisted. "You're so confident and driven. It's inspiring." "Maybe on the outside," I replied quietly. "But inside, it's a different story. Sometimes I feel like I'm just trying to keep up with everyone else's expectations." Sophie paused, looking at me intently. "You don't have to be perfect all the time. It's okay to be yourself, even if that means being messy or uncertain." Her words resonated deeply within me. In that moment, standing side by side with Sophie amidst splatters of paint and laughter, I realized how much I had been holding back, not just from others but from myself as well. As our painting session came to an end, we stepped back to admire our work, two canvases filled with vibrant colors and chaotic designs that somehow reflected our journey together so far. "This is really good," Sophie said with genuine admiration as she examined my piece. "Thanks. But yours is still way better," I replied playfully. We shared a laugh before silence enveloped us again, a comfortable silence filled with unspoken understanding. "Do you want to do this again sometime?" Sophie asked hesitantly. "I'd like that," I replied without hesitation. As we cleaned up our supplies, an undeniable connection lingered in the air between us, a connection that felt both exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. When we finally stepped out of the art room into the bustling hallway filled with students rushing past us, everything felt different again, like we were stepping into a new chapter of our lives where rivalry faded away and friendship blossomed. And maybe something more. The following week, the air was thick with anticipation as the school prepared for its annual talent show. Students were buzzing with excitement, each eager to showcase their skills. I found myself caught up in the frenzy, not just because of my usual competitive spirit but because I wanted to support Sophie. After our painting session, I had realized how much I admired her talent and passion for art. Sophie had decided to display her artwork at the talent show, and I was determined to help her make it a success. We spent hours discussing her pieces, selecting the ones that best represented her unique style. Each artwork told a story, and I could see how deeply personal they were to her. On the day of the show, the auditorium was alive with energy. The stage was adorned with colorful decorations, and the smell of popcorn wafted through the air. As I helped Sophie set up her display, my heart raced with excitement for her. She arranged her paintings with meticulous care, each piece reflecting a part of her soul. "Do you think people will like them?" Sophie asked nervously, biting her lip as she stepped back to assess her work. "Of course they will. Your art is incredible," I reassured her, trying to mask my own nerves. "Just remember to breathe and enjoy it." As the show began, students took turns performing, singing, dancing, and showcasing their talents. Each act received cheers and applause, but my focus remained on Sophie. When it was finally time for her to present her artwork, she stood nervously at the side of the stage, glancing at me for support. "Go get 'em," I whispered encouragingly as she walked onto the stage. Sophie took a deep breath and began to speak about her pieces. Her voice trembled slightly at first, but as she shared the stories behind each painting, how they represented moments of joy, struggle, and self-discovery, her confidence blossomed. The audience listened intently, captivated by her passion and authenticity. I felt a swell of pride as I watched her shine. She was no longer just my rival, she was an artist pouring her heart into every word and brushstroke. When she finished speaking, the audience erupted into applause. I clapped loudly, cheering for her as if she were my best friend, because in that moment, she truly felt like one. After her presentation, Sophie returned to me with a bright smile lighting up her face. "I can't believe I did it," she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "You were amazing. Everyone loved your art," I replied genuinely. As we celebrated together amidst the crowd, something shifted in the air between us. The playful banter we had shared before felt different now, charged with an electricity that made my heart race. It was as if we were standing on the precipice of something new and thrilling. Later that evening, as we left the auditorium together, Sophie turned to me with a serious expression. "Can we talk about something?" "Sure," I said cautiously. "I've really enjoyed spending time with you," she began slowly. "And I know we started off as rivals, but it feels like we've become friends." I nodded in agreement but felt a flutter of anxiety in my stomach. "Yeah, definitely." Sophie took a deep breath before continuing. "I've been thinking about how much we've opened up to each other lately, and I don't want that to change." Her words hung in the air between us like an unspoken question. My heart raced as I realized what she was hinting at, the possibility of something more than friendship. "I don't want it to change either," I replied softly, my voice barely above a whisper. Sophie stepped closer, searching my eyes for reassurance. What if there's more between us? Something deeper. The world around us faded away as those words sank in. My mind raced with confusion and excitement. Could this be real? Was it possible that amidst our rivalry and competition, we had discovered something beautiful? "I think there is," I admitted finally, feeling vulnerable yet exhilarated by my honesty. Before I could second-guess myself or pull away from this moment, Sophie reached out and took my hand in hers, a simple gesture that sent shivers down my spine. Her touch felt electric and comforting all at once. In that instant, everything shifted again, our rivalry transformed into something profound, a connection that promised adventure beyond anything we had ever known. As we stood there hand in hand under the fading light of day, laughter and music echoing from inside the auditorium behind us, I felt a sense of freedom wash over me. This was new territory, unfamiliar yet thrilling, and I couldn't wait to explore it together. The days following our heart-to-heart conversation felt like a whirlwind. Sophie and I had crossed an invisible line, and everything had changed. What had started as a rivalry had blossomed into something deeper, something that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. We spent every free moment together, exploring our newfound connection. One afternoon, we decided to go for a walk in the park after school. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over everything. The air was crisp, and the leaves crunched beneath our feet as we strolled along the winding path. I could feel the warmth of Sophie's hand brushing against mine, sending butterflies fluttering in my stomach. "I can't believe how much has changed," I said, glancing at her with a smile. "It feels like just yesterday we were at each other's throats." Sophie laughed softly, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Yeah, who would have thought we'd end up here? It's kind of crazy." We found a secluded bench under a large oak tree and sat down, the world around us fading into a comfortable background hum. I turned to Sophie, feeling the weight of everything unsaid between us. "Can I ask you something?" I said hesitantly. "Of course," she replied, her expression shifting to one of curiosity. "What are we doing? I mean, what does this mean for us?" My heart raced as I spoke, unsure of how she would respond. Sophie looked thoughtful for a moment, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. "I think it means we're exploring something new together. Something that feels right." She paused, searching my eyes for understanding. "But I also know it's scary." "It is," I admitted, feeling vulnerable. "I've never felt this way about anyone before." "Me neither," she said softly. "But it feels good to be honest about it." Just then, a group of students walked by, laughing and joking as they passed us. My heart sank as I thought about how they might react if they knew about us, about me and Sophie together. Would they accept it? Or would they ridicule us? Sophie must have sensed my unease because she squeezed my hand gently. "Hey, no matter what happens out there," she said firmly, "I want you to know that this is real for me." Her words filled me with warmth and courage. "It's real for me too," I replied earnestly. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows around us, we leaned closer together. Our breaths mingled in the cool evening air as I felt the urge to kiss her, a desire that had been building since our first moment together in the storage room. Before I could second-guess myself, I leaned in and pressed my lips against hers softly. The kiss was tentative at first but quickly deepened as Sophie responded eagerly. It felt like fireworks exploding in my chest, an intoxicating mix of fear and joy. When we finally pulled away, both of us breathless and wide-eyed, I couldn't help but smile. "Wow," I breathed out. "Wow indeed," Sophie echoed with a grin that lit up her face. But just as quickly as our blissful moment began, doubt crept back in. "What if people find out?" I asked quietly, my heart racing at the thought. Sophie took a deep breath before answering. "Let them find out if they do. We can't control what others think or say about us." Her voice was steady and reassuring. I nodded slowly but couldn't shake the anxiety gnawing at me. What would my friends think? What would my parents say? The fear of judgment loomed large in my mind. As if sensing my turmoil, Sophie leaned closer again, her eyes locking onto mine with unwavering intensity. "Arya," she said softly, "this is about us, our happiness. If we let fear dictate our choices, we'll never truly be free." Her words struck a chord deep within me. She was right, living in fear would only hold me back from experiencing something beautiful and genuine. "I want this," I said finally, determination flooding my voice. "I want you." Sophie's smile widened at my admission as relief washed over her features. "And I want you too," she replied earnestly. We sat there for a while longer under the oak tree, wrapped up in each other's presence as the stars began to twinkle overhead. The world around us faded away, it was just me and Sophie, two girls discovering love amidst uncertainty. But as we made our way back home that evening, a nagging thought lingered in the back of my mind: how would our classmates react when they found out? Would they accept us or tear us apart? Little did I know that soon enough, those questions would be answered in ways none of us could have ever anticipated. The following week felt like a roller coaster of emotions. Sophie and I had crossed a threshold into something beautiful, yet the fear of judgment loomed over me like a dark cloud. I found myself constantly glancing around, worried about what our classmates might say if they discovered our relationship. Despite my anxiety, I was determined to embrace what we had, even if it meant facing the unknown. One afternoon, we met at our favorite cafe after school, a cozy little spot with mismatched furniture and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the air. As I walked in, I spotted Sophie sitting at a corner table, her sketchbook open in front of her. She looked up and smiled, and my heart fluttered at the sight of her. "Hey," she greeted, her eyes sparkling with warmth. "Hey," I replied, sliding into the chair across from her. "What are you working on?" "Just some ideas for my next painting," she said, flipping through the pages of her sketchbook. "I want to capture the feeling of freedom." I leaned over to get a better look at her sketches, beautiful swirls of color and abstract shapes that seemed to dance across the page. "These are incredible," I said genuinely. "You have such a talent for this." "Thanks. It helps me express what I'm feeling," she replied, her cheeks flushing slightly at my compliment. As we chatted over coffee and pastries, I felt a sense of ease wash over me. For that moment, it was just us, no worries about what others thought or how they might react. But as we finished our drinks and prepared to leave, reality hit me again. "What if someone sees us?" I asked hesitantly as we stepped outside. Sophie paused, looking at me with concern. "Are you ashamed of us?" "No, it's not that," I protested quickly. I don't want to deal with people's reactions." She sighed softly, taking my hand in hers. "Arya, we can't let fear dictate our happiness. If we hide who we are, we'll never truly be free." Her words resonated deeply within me. I wanted to be brave, to embrace this love that felt so right. But the thought of facing judgment still made my stomach churn. As we walked down the street hand in hand, I noticed a group of students from our school hanging out nearby. My heart raced as they laughed and joked together, oblivious to our presence. Sophie must have sensed my unease because she squeezed my hand tighter. "Let's just be ourselves," she said softly but firmly. Taking a deep breath, I nodded in agreement. We continued walking past the group, trying to project confidence even as my heart hammered in my chest. But just as we passed by, one of the girls from the group called out. "Look who it is, the debate queen and the art freak." Her tone dripped with mockery. I froze, heat flooding my cheeks as laughter erupted from her friends. My heart sank as embarrassment washed over me like ice water. Sophie turned to face them, her expression unyielding. "What's your problem?" she shot back, defiantly. "Nothing. Just surprised to see you two together," the girl sneered. "Didn't think you'd ever hang out with someone like her, Arya." I felt torn between wanting to defend Sophie and fearing the backlash that might follow. But before I could respond, Sophie stepped forward. "Maybe you should try getting to know people instead of judging them," she said boldly. "You might be surprised by what you find." The laughter died down as surprise flickered across their faces. For a moment, it felt like time stood still, like everything hinged on this confrontation. "Whatever," the girl huffed before turning away with her friends. As they walked off, I turned to Sophie, my heart racing with admiration for her bravery. "You were incredible," I breathed out. She smiled softly but then looked serious again. "But how did that make you feel?" "I don't know," I admitted honestly. Part of me wanted to hide, but another part wanted to stand up for us. Sophie nodded thoughtfully. "It's going to take time for us to figure this out together." We continued walking in silence for a while until we reached a quiet park bench surrounded by blooming flowers and tall trees swaying gently in the breeze. "I want you to know that no matter what happens out there," Sophie said earnestly as she took my hands in hers again, "I'm proud of us." Her words filled me with warmth and courage. Maybe it was time for me to embrace who I truly was, someone who loved fiercely and openly without fear of judgment. "I'm proud too," I replied softly, looking into her eyes with newfound determination. As we sat there under the sunlit sky, surrounded by nature's beauty and each other's presence, I felt an overwhelming sense of clarity wash over me. This was who I wanted to be, someone unafraid to love openly and authentically. With that realization came a wave of excitement for what lay ahead. Whatever challenges awaited us would only make our bond stronger. And as we leaned in closer together on that park bench, sharing soft kisses filled with promise and hope for our future, I knew that no matter what happened next, we would face it together.